I've been teaching a body of work called Compassionate Communication, also called Nonviolent Communication, NVC, for about 12 years. And for me, compassionate communication is like the hands and feet of spiritual practice. So it gives us a means to express these values in everyday interactions and relationships. It gives us something concrete to lean into when we lose our way. So I'm very, very passionate about bringing our spiritual practice together with practical skills in relationship. And so that's what this focus is about. So the first thing I want to say about that is that just like in a spiritual practice, for me, NVC is really about a sense of presence and a sense of mindfulness. So being able to come from this place of choice, really. If you want to connect, if you want to thrive in your relationships with yourself and contribute to others thriving, then it requires a certain consciousness about, am I connected? Am I not connected? What's getting in my way? What would I like to do about that? So while NVC has specific vocabulary and structure, and some of that will be practicing, that really is like a handrail to lean on when you lose your way. It's not meant to be the work itself, right? So it's just meant to be one way you can get back to connection when you lose your way. The real intention of this work is just to bring that mindfulness. Where's my heart, and where would I like my heart to be? That's it. Just simple like that. Right? Presence meaning being the most important aspect of the practice. Any questions about that so far? Does that resonate? Make sense? And where you're all coming from? Okay. Okay. So I'd like to start with creating a shared definition for empathy. And I want to offer you how I'm holding it. And then if you have more you want to add to that or questions about that, we can do that too. So in the more concrete structural way from compassionate communication, empathy is simply a willingness to guess, either silently or out loud, the feelings and needs of the person in front of you. That's it. In more of a deeper practice way, it really, to do that, really requires you to maintain a connection with yourself. So we have some sci-fi examples of empaths, Star Trek and such. And the empaths in those movies are able to completely somehow like land in the other person's body and say exactly what that person's experience is. We're not shooting quite that high, right? We're wanting to stay actually in our own body and in your own center, and from your own center, you can actually just get curious about the other person's experience. That's what I'm meaning by empathy. The other thing that empathy requires is a willingness to be comfortable with other people's discomfort. Right? So as compassionate, caring beings that you all are, if you see someone in pain, what are some of the impulses you have?
Flee.
Flee, yes. Fix them, yeah. Comfort them, give them a hug. Tell them, don't feel that. You don't have to feel that way, it's okay. Right? Try and get that person out of pain or get yourself out of the pain of seeing them in pain. So empathy really requires that willingness to hang out with someone when they're in pain, hold a space for that to exist, make a connection to that pain, and also more deeply hold a space in yourself where you're trusting that this other person is capable and able. Right? That they actually don't need your rescuing. That your presence is really the biggest gift you can give. Let's see what else. The other thing that I hear folks talk about with empathy and why they avoid empathy sometimes, or offering empathy, is because they're afraid of going into empathy hostage. Right? Many of you are even the least bit skilled at being a good listener or offering empathy. You've probably found that people find out about you. Right? And then they look for you, and then they want to talk because they know you'll listen, and they're really needing empathy. And if you don't know how to set a boundary there, right? I've enjoyed hearing you, but now I notice I'm hungry and I'm going to go eat, right? To be able to keep track of yourself, right? And end that listening session, we might call it. If you're not able to trust yourself to do that, then it's going to be pretty hard to offer empathy, right? Because you'll be afraid of being taken hostage. So empathy requires good boundaries, in other words, right? One more thing. Two more things. So as we're growing up, we're often taught to listen in a particular way, and usually that way is to listen for content, right? Growing up, in most people, I'm guessing, we're told, listen to what I'm saying as the teacher or guide of some sort, and remember the facts and then repeat them. So that's a lot of mental listening, a lot of cognitive focusing. And the value there is for mental clarity or memory or knowledge, right? So I find that it sometimes can be hard to shift out of that. So empathy really requires shifting out of that. Even so much as letting yourself not even understand what the other person is saying, right? You don't really have to understand mentally everything someone says to give empathy. And that's usually a big relief to folks, because that's a lot of hard work sometimes, right? To really understand, so this and then this. And I often find when I'm needing empathy the most, I'm the least articulate and the least clear, right? So if someone's interrupting me to say, now what did you mean by that? And how do those two things fit together? It's like I move out of the space of connection and into this realization about how unclear I am, and maybe self-criticism comes. Or maybe I'm just feeling more disconnected than ever, right? So it requires that sense of, oh, I can let go of this kind of listening that I'm used to doing. And the last thing that I think keeps people from empathy, that can be very tricky, is, and it has to do with boundaries too, that if I give you empathy, you'll think I approve of your behavior or that I agree with your opinion. Right? That's some tricky territory. So that also requires you to trust yourself to clarify once it's your time to talk. And even as I hear you say all that, I notice some things come up in me. Would you like to hear them? The first is, I see that situation differently, right? Just honoring your own difference there. That's kind of a lot. How you doing? Does that sound make all good sense to you? Yeah? Anything to add or any questions there? Yeah.
I have had what feels to me to be a very neurotic habit of way over monitoring other people ever since I was little.
Yeah.
And it's something I've really been working on to disconnect from that. And as soon as you started to define empathy, and what I heard, I can't remember the actual words you used, but I heard something very similar to what I am trying to no longer do, which is this kind of obsessive monitoring of other people and trying to figure out where they're at. And it's all coming from a place of fear and that kind of thing. It's not coming from any kind of compassion for them, for sure. But is there any way to make a distinction between, other than what's going on inside of me in that moment, are there other distinctions to be made?
Between empathy and just kind of vigilance?
Vigilance, right.
Like the scary kind of vigilance? Yeah. Well, let's start with what's going on inside of you. That's an easier place.
Yeah.
So, she says, yeah, sure. So I'm hearing, well, let me make some guesses and you can just tell me. How's that sound? Make it easier for you. So I'm guessing with that kind of fearful vigilance, there's a sense of contraction in you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So with empathy, there would be a sense of expansion. Right? Maybe another distinction with vigilance, there would be a sense of kind of laser beam attention. And with empathy, there would be a broad curiosity. As a starter.
Those are nice.
Yeah. And maybe from the outside, if I were watching you converse with someone, your empathy would sound like open-ended guesses, right? And your vigilance would sound like closed-in questions. More like interrogation or information-finding questions. Yeah?
Interesting. I have to watch that one.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good example. Anything else? Okay. So,
Another thing there?
Yeah.
That my guess would be that the vigilance is really predictive in its intention.
Yeah.
You're trying to get what's going to be happening, whereas with empathy, it's really about the relation.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's happening here?
Right.
Instead of what's about to happen or what could happen. What do I have to prevent?
Empathy is about the relationship. Vigilance is about predicting information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So, to further define empathy, it's helpful to name what it's not. So on page, like the third page of your handout, you have a list of things that are not empathy. Sympathy, advice, explaining, analyzing, correcting, consoling, telling a story, pushing away feelings, investigating, evaluating, educating, one-upping, diagnose, demand, denial of choice, nod and smile, and collusion.
What this is the summary, what my wife would call the summary of the male way of communicating.
Yikes! Are there any females in the room that find themselves doing any of these things?
Oh, yes.
Okay, maybe more universal than that.
Okay.
And women are going to take more responsibility. So, some of these things definitely are a direct road to disconnect in the long term, and some of these things meet lots of needs. They're just not empathy, that's all, right? And these responses tend to be habitual or unconscious ways of responding to someone who's either celebrating a success or sharing a difficulty with you. So we just want to make it conscious so you can actually choose, right? So when you're habitually giving these responses, you're kind of assuming what the other person needs from you. Just be aware of that. So go ahead and take a look at that list and see what your top 2 most common ways of responding are. And maybe take a couple of minutes, and once you find them, go ahead and just share with someone next to you what you notice about those 2 things.
Well, and I think there's behind